Hello, I'm Professor Jagdish Sheth at Emory University. This presentation is all about future of undergraduate business education. The title of the presentation is Innovations in Undergraduate Business Education. And what I will do will be to give you some good news in the beginning, and then the bad news, and ultimately what are the initiatives many universities are doing both in America and outside, plus my own suggestions about how to continue growing undergraduate business education. First, the good news. 20% of all undergraduate college degrees awarded in 2015 were business majors. Think about hundreds of majors that are possible today. And we get more and more super specialized at the undergraduate level. And at one time, undergraduate was something that may be a stepping stone to go for your graduate education if you wanted to be scholarly, brainy, etc. Like a master's degree and a PhD in humanities is very common, social science is very common, but this is a very different phenomenon here. So 20% of all undergraduate degrees granted in the US in 1925 were business majors. The median income of business undergraduates was $66,530 in May 2016. Let's round it off to 65,000, as compared to 37,000 for all undergraduates. So it is commanding almost twice the amount of livelihood, economic asset value for undergraduate business education, which is why probably it's growing. 25%, which means 1.4 million out of 5.6 million of business majors continue to earn master's degree and professional degrees. In other words, people don't stop with undergraduate degree alone, but 1/4 of them end up going further in higher education, probably because it pays off better economically, career-wise, occupationally, whatever the reasons are. More than 60,000 also earned the doctorate degree. This number really surprised me. And I've been in the academic business more than 50 years, and I had never imagined that so many undergraduate business majors will end up doing the doctorate, because typical doctorate in business means you are not going to join, like in engineering and science, a corporate R&D or a lab, like an IBM lab or a Google Labs or anything like that. Undergraduate business majors, when they do the doctorate, end up being more academics. Maybe some in market research, maybe some in finance, but not otherwise. So this came as a very great surprise to me, very positive surprise. The growth rate of degrees in business is likely to continue until at least 2025. So why this presentation? Why status quo not? Just continue the way we do business, which is where the bad news comes. The bad news is that the external world is changing dramatically. And I'll identify 4 forces that are changing, which will impact all higher education and definitely the undergraduate business education. To understand that phenomenon, I wanted to bring in another book I had written in 2007 or 8, titled Self-Destructive Habits of Good Companies. The most insightful question I've been ever asked by any CEO of a large corporation was, they call me Jag, like in Jaguar, Jag, why good companies fail? This was the CEO of a telecom large, Baby Bell, and he actually wanted to role model 4 companies for the future transformation of the telephone company: Kodak for branding and distribution, Sears for retail presence, because ultimately telephone companies are retailers, IBM for business to business market, and Xerox for technology. They were the darlings in the 80s, for example, and by the 90s, all of them had plateaued or even declined. Some of them couldn't even survive. He raised that question, and my answer was that I don't know. I never thought about that question. So I ended up doing 1.5 years, 2 years research, deep dive into the subject as to why good companies fail, and came out with a book called Self-Destructive Habits of Good Companies, although my original title was going to be 7 Bad Habits of Good Companies. In other words, good companies don't die because of external disruption that we think about, because of, let's say, non-traditional competition, as I will talk about, but they die because they want to remain status quo management. They are either unable to change or unwilling to change. I saw unwillingness to change in a great company called Digital, where the founder believed that PC can never do the work of a mainframe computer, even though there was a PC revolution. Microsoft was just starting the journey, and rather than adapt to the PC revolution, he refused, invested in supercomputing on the other side, and the company began to nosedive in less than 25 years. IBM was the great example of inability to change. The senior-most leader in the company knew world is no longer one of legacy computer systems. Servers are coming here. World is going from analog to digital in a significant way. Cell phone revolution was about to start. Apple was coming out with an iPad, a notebook of some sort. PC probably was not the future. It just goes on. And they all knew about this stuff, but he could not do anything. Isn't that interesting? So if you are either unable to change or unwilling to change in good times, you are likely to decline in the future. Conclusive evidence. And the 7 bad habits were things like, as you would expect, denial of new realities came out loud and clear. Arrogance or hubris came out. Complacency came out. But things that came out were more like competitive myopia. Identifying competition as neighborhood, another college or university for undergraduate education, or Ivy Leagues comparing themselves with Ivy Leagues only, state universities comparing with state universities for their undergraduate business education, whereas competition may be somewhere else, and transform the industry. So what are the factors that are driving the undergraduate business education? The biggest factor, I think, is affordability. Higher education has outpriced itself, and it's not sustainable. There is no way students can borrow money. Average, as you know, the student debt today for undergraduate education is about $21,000. The costs are rising. Even at state universities, if you are a non-resident, the costs are at least twice as much as for the resident students. Scholarships are there in some states, but it's not universal. Affordability will become a key factor, and somebody will discover a different formula than the traditional formula we anchor toward accreditation rules. In fact, my view is that accreditation bodies have to change and adapt to make the viability and survival of the undergraduate business education into the future. Along with affordability is a whole question of accessibility. How big a campus can you make? You may have the Arizona State of the world, Ohio State of the world, maybe University of Central Florida as a single location with 50,000, 60,000 students. Yeah, you can increase to 100,000 students. That does not matter. When you have millions and millions of people out there wanting to do undergraduate and a necessity to do undergraduate. In other words, high school graduation was stopping at one time. It is not even possible, because with a high school education you end up primarily earning minimum wages or below minimum wages for that matter, and you can't survive economically. So going for some sort of a 2-year associate degree in some undergraduate business major like accounting or finance or marketing, whatever they are, or a 4-year college, which is what we are thinking about, is absolutely a necessity, which means the volume of students wanting to go to college will rise enormously. And as you know, it is both now unisex. More women are going to the undergraduate schools than men are doing, actually, at least in the US. And now you add the worldwide population. You have seen how many Chinese students are now coming to study in America across all universities, private or state. So are students from India. Massive numbers are coming besides their own countries. So undergraduate education has to have access. And the typical brick and mortar way of accessing is not sufficient. In fact, it will collapse over the overburden of managing the classrooms. Related to that one is the digital age is here. So if you have Coursera type platforms, what are called MOOCs, if you have the edX type of platforms, open access education in some fashion, scalable, especially with cloud computing, cell phones, you can just talk about all the technological jargon, but basically digital age is here. We are no longer in the industrial age or even in a services economy. We are beyond that stuff, and therefore that is going to be as disruptive, bringing about a change in the way we teach in the classrooms. Non-traditional competition, third major force. There are not only for-profit organizations which have done not too well recently, but they will come back. But there will be actually foundation-based universities, large scale. It is not like foundations like Ford Foundation giving money to educational institutions to do something new, different. But foundations of tomorrow are going to say, we are capable of starting our own universities, our own agendas, and there are several in Silicon Valley which are thinking about ways to do things differently in the way the curriculums are designed, in the way experienced managers are used as faculty members, inviting worldwide scholars. The traditional approach to the way we do brick and mortar education and the way you have the tenure process, all of them are now becoming legacy issues. The traditional world-class colleges and universities in their undergraduate education are bound by accreditation rules, policies and procedures, brick and mortar mentality, etc. So non-traditional competition has to become disruptive. And we have already seen that the biggest innovation does not happen at the top-rated universities. It happens at the Tier 2 and often at Tier 3 universities. There is more innovation in community colleges today just for survival than it is in the top premier Ivy colleges or leagues. And the last area is the rise of the Asian century. Unlike the rise of the American century, which created the scale on higher education compared to Europe, the scale here is massive, by a factor of 5 times in each country, especially China and India. If you take the ASEAN bloc, if you take China, India, Japan, South Korea, just as a measure of Asian century or Asian economy, we are talking about massive numbers here. And they cannot do it in the traditional way. And I think we will see more innovation out in Asia than it is in the advanced economies, which means we will have a lot of reverse innovation. That's very possible. Now, I'm not pessimistic at all. Unlike in my book, Self-Destructive Habits of Good Companies, I articulated only failures, although provided recipes of what can be done to intervene and change the bad habit to a good habit. Biggest problem was diagnosis in that case. Like a medical doctor, more important skill is diagnosis, not remedy. Once you know the right diagnosis, you know what to do. So some universities worldwide focused on undergraduate business education have been thinking out of the box. And I think those are good role models. There is no one single recipe. So how can we do it? I found fascinating that University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business, now offers 3 degrees from 3 universities in 3 different locations. USC in Los Angeles, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology in Hong Kong, obviously, and Bocconi University in Italy. It is not just the exchange student, but I get now as a student 3 degrees. Out of 4 years, you spend 1 year at each campus, And the fourth year is you decide where you want to spend based upon your specialization within the School of Business and probably employment opportunity. I think it's neat because 3 degrees are majoring in 3 different places or 3 different subjects. We allow 1 major, 1 minor at the undergraduate level. This is very innovative, and I'm very hopeful that it will survive economically and will do very well. And I can multiply if it is with 2 universities, which is normal. Now 3 universities, why not 4? It's possible. One can think out of the box. Arizona State University has a very interesting program. There's a Global Freshman Academy. Freshman year is anywhere in the world. You don't have to be physically on the campus, which primarily says that the cost of relocation, dislocation within the United States, away from, let's say, Phoenix, Arizona, to any other state, living in a dormitory, you reduce the cost of living expenses, etc. from foreign countries, and therefore freshman year anywhere in the world, I think is a great idea. Elon University, Love School of Business, they have literally created an innovation house. Who said the campus must have only fraternities and sororities? Campus can use its real estate for an innovation house where people incubate ideas. They'll eat there, they sleep there, they breathe there. It's all about entrepreneurship where physical location matters. Living together as entrepreneurs is like living together as roommates, sharing experiences, mentoring each other. That's a very key. I thought that was a great idea. University of Notre Dame, add more credits for innovation and entrepreneurship. Worldwide, the belief is that all economies, advanced economies like Japan, South Korea, all of Europe, America, needs a spark for growth through innovation and entrepreneurship, not through population growth. There is a population lack of growth or even a decline. So they have come out with a neat idea. Why not add more courses and make it mandatory credits for those so that you steer the curriculum in favor of innovation and entrepreneurship? It's a difference at the margin, but very important difference, I think. Emory University, my place where I teach, the Gosweta School of Business is right now experimenting MSBA degree program. Business analytics, including data mining, data storage, is a very large scale employment opportunity. It's the next generation of employment as manufacturing was in the last generation or the last century. And combined BBA and MSBA combination is very fascinating. Adding 1 more year, 5-year program is something that one can do. This is not unique to Emory University. Quite a few are experimenting, especially creating an MS degree in business analytics. We are already doing MS degree in accounting just to meet the accounting standards for sitting for CPA exams by extending 1 year. I think it can be done in every discipline. There should be a MSBA or MS, whatever we call it, in marketing. MSBA in management. MSBA in information sciences. Just goes on. All the disciplines of business one can do it, right? So this 5-year BBA MBA programs is the next very interesting area and does not have to be 5-year. In fact, in many places we are finding, because of the affordability, especially at private universities, many students are graduating in 3 years. You extend 1 more year and the lifetime value of that 1 year is extraordinary for the university's economics. We are, of course, going after double and joint degree majors. So you can major simultaneously in business and film making, business and music, business and health, whatever it turns out to be. Why not business and spirituality? Who said those cannot exist? It is very possible. So things like that can be done. As I mentioned, there is a 3-year BBA programs evolving now, where the students in summertime, rather than going for internship, would say, I would like to do more intense courses and come out with more credits. Some of them go to London School of Economics, for example, if you want to be a finance major, and you can get some more credits out of that one, however you do it. University of Winnipeg and Georgia Perimeter College are the case studies that I discovered through my research, and you may want to look at what they do. I found something very fascinating, and this is totally unorthodox. Bond University in Australia is now having a 2-year fast-track undergraduate business major. One of the reasons is very simple, because in many other countries, like in India, it is not a semester system but a 3-term system like we used to have. I remember going through 3 terms in a year for my MBA, for example, in America. How do you do that 3 terms rather than semester? And therefore they have 3 terms each year, and in 2 years you get your bachelor's degree. And then they start every term in January, new batch, in May another batch, and in September a 3rd batch. So you get scale economies that you need pretty much from one class to the other class by having not one fall admission only, but 3 times admission for the undergraduate program. We of course have a lot of dual degree or twinning programs that are on the rise, especially with foreign entities or foreign countries. So you spend 2 years in India, have a curriculum that is recognized, so you don't have to do all the foundational work in statistics, math, calculus, whatever they are, and you come into the business program here as a transfer student prepared for your foundational courses that the university requires. That's very common. It's becoming more and more common. Very common in the medical schools nowadays that I find. I sat on the board of a very large medical college education university called Manipal University, and that is how they did it in Malaysia, for example. All 5 years of education in India was not viable. Most of the students were of Indian origin in Malaysia. Prime Minister Mahathir said it's not acceptable. We must have, in fact, Bhumiputras, who are the native Malaysians, and of course the Chinese Malays. And what they did was to build a hospital in Malacca. 2 years they come to city of Manipal, where this college or Manipal University is located, do the basic science, etc. as a pre-med course, and then they study 3 years in Malacca, in Malaysia. They have to have a hospital for clinical practice, and the faculty from India come and teach there along with the local faculty. What is happening in medicine, what is happening in engineering, even in sciences now, we in the business school need to learn. They are doing it out of necessity because the cost of a medical degree is outrageous no matter where you do it. Manipal University is therefore experimenting in other nations like Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and they will come here one of these days in the medical field. Of course, experiential learning is coming back. The old co-op model is rediscovered with a vengeance, I think, which I think is very good. We are, after all, an applied discipline, where whatever concepts we learn from other disciplines, behavioral sciences, economic sciences, quantitative sciences, and maybe humanities in general, need to be applied into the business setting. Therefore, having more than vocational, but less than just cerebral is very important. So cognitive knowledge has to be supplemented by experiential knowledge or hands-on things. Working in factories, managing human resource issues, etc., etc. So those are the experiments taking place right now, which I think it will revitalize the undergraduate business education. Accreditation bodies such as ASCSB will look at that and say it makes sense for the future. We may have a blended learning, flipping the class, for example, where professor's lecture actually is recorded, students watch, and classrooms are for discussion, opposite of the lab that we went through, where you have a large lecture, you break them up into small classes, where you have a case or some problem solving, where the TA will do all that work. This is sort of flipping the class. Very common. With the new Canvas platform, it is very doable, quite manageable. But I have some additional suggestions, and I hope this presentation doesn't get too long in the process. I think the first thing I'm recommending is that we need to go beyond SAT and ACT as the requirements. Our assessments were not designed for the future. They were designed as admission standards for the past. The world is changing. So I would go beyond ACT and SAT in the short run, adding some additional way of screening students or discovering the potential. My view is that the error of omission and error of commission both are very high when you use the traditional test, ACT or SAT. Even though they are revised constantly, they do not basically are reflection of the future. And therefore we have some great students who have potential, especially those who have an entrepreneurial skill set, probably are not good at taking the test. And those who take very good tests may not do very well in the class. We have a lot of evidence in terms of testing and how it correlates with performance, outcome, ultimate success in life, however we measure it. My second recommendation, very strong, is that we must have in every class a global perspective. We are not living in an isolated economy. Why all of our cases are only American? Why all of our issues are American? Why do we give a view on capitalism and stock market only American perspective? I think we live in a global economy. Our graduates will work in a global setting, even in a domestic corporation. So we need to add global perspectives in classrooms, through textbooks or supplementary textbooks, in classroom projects, and in case studies. I think it's very important. I get lots of foreign students in my class, and they are always constantly complaining, Professor, every class that I go to, all the cases are all American. There are no European cases, there are no Asian cases, there are no Latin American, African cases. Since I teach more global marketing, I go out of my way to select cases which are how American companies are not doing well abroad or doing well, like the Amazon, the Walmarts of the world, but how foreign companies are coming to advanced economies. So global perspective is very important, as opposed to just an American perspective or a German perspective or a British perspective in each country. Third, very important, is that unlike the student abroad programs, we must have faculty abroad programs. Our faculty is a lot more myopic. They remain more insulated. They are on the campus, don't have the physical experience of living or teaching or studying abroad. So creating a faculty abroad program will be more transformational. I have seen that thing. At Emory University, university-wide, we had a Hala Institute selecting 2 people, 1 professional staff and 1 obviously academic from each academic unit, maybe a delegation of 23, 24 people. They will go to India for 3 weeks, and when they come back, they're totally different people. They will go to Germany and come back, they're totally different people, different perspectives. So I think faculty abroad ought to be a mandatory program built into the faculty career pathing at a university, especially in the business degree. We have BBA, MS degree programs. My view is that the student of the future or the graduate of the future has to be a deep generalist. Not only should they know everything about business, all the 5, 6 majors that we have or the disciplines, but they need to have a deep specialization in one of them. We probably do a good job in finance. We might be doing a good job in information sciences or operations management and information sciences combined together, but we don't do a good job, for example, in marketing. At the end, the student should be employable immediately in any kind of a brand management program, sales management program, digital marketing program, having in-depth courses which requires 1 extra year, at least 1 semester. And how can we do a BBA, MS degree programs like the old MS degrees which I'm very fond of personally. That one was created to find out a good scholar and therefore eventually a professor. But in this case, BBA MS degree is a terminal degree replacing BBA MBA, because MBA is a repetition of the undergraduate business, same core courses are required. Minor in business for arts and sciences. There's a huge opportunity. Arts and sciences is a large college on any university. Their students are less and less employable. Some of them are switching to business for employability. But their passion lies in liberal arts, in humanities, or in social sciences. Why not create a minor in business for them, not major in business? Huge opportunity. As I mentioned, a lot of innovation is taking place in emerging economies. They are the experiments of today, will become the reality of tomorrow, and therefore we need to learn what is happening in emerging economies, our sheer necessity for the scale and the volume. And there are open universities in countries like India with 4 million students. That's the scale, not the Apollo group for profit, for example, or even a Coursera or edX. How can we learn what they are doing, experimenting, and see what is appropriate for us? We definitely need to teach more than shareholder value. I think we detoured ourselves to say the only role of business is to create shareholder value. That is a theory only possible from the first energy crisis in the 70s. Shareholder value became an obsession. Companies were never driven by shareholders, they were driven by stakeholders. They invested in communities, they invested in employees. And in fact, I have a book in this area called Forms of Endearment, where I found companies located in small towns were more stakeholders because the CEO and the managers had to live in the community. Church was a great equalizer. Their employees or managers, for the chairman and the CEO or the family even, were their neighbors. Their children or grandchildren went to the same school. There was this informal equalization, no formal hierarchy of being a faculty and a department head and a dean and a provost, etc. Everybody was more egalitarian. I think we need to inculcate the shared value, as Michael Porter has suggested, or in our book what we have done quite a lot in Forms of Endearment, and create a whole movement called conscious capitalism. It is a runaway success. CEOs are listening to that. Except in the academic world, we still hang on to this view that what matters for a corporation is the shareholder value. We need to retrain, re-educate our faculty, not just our students. Next area is my passion. I began to think about it 25 years ago, that the 3 R's of learning on which we have foundational base for high school education continuing into college needs to give way to 3 I's of learning. What are the 3 I's? The learning should be integrated between different courses. What is common between information sciences and marketing? What is common between operations and accounting, or whatever turns out to be? So the education or the learning should be integrated. It should be interactive. It is not like my lecturing at an undergraduate level, but having a dialogue. And the third element is individualized. How can I create a mass customization model where in a class of 100 or 500 students, I can provide still individualized learning and education? Fortunately, all 3 I's of learning are possible today because of digital technology. A platform like Canvas or Blackboard before that one, whatever it is interactive. I can individualize it if I want to, mass customization, and I can make it integrated by adding supplemental knowledge on that platform outside the classroom, which connects the dots between business disciplines themselves, among themselves, or business and society as a discipline. One of the key issues is going to be managing internal stakeholders. I think business as a school and a discipline is such a great success that there is a huge anxiety, especially in colleges of liberal arts, especially in humanities. Many liberal arts colleges feel like they can't even survive if they are just colleges. How can they blend, or how can they participate in this exciting new degree where 25% of the students, as I mentioned, are all business undergraduates and growing? I think we need to have a partnership relationship where is it possible to have philosophy of science, ethics, etc. linked very closely to business. Managing internal stakeholders will become more and more necessary so that we don't have as many politics or turf wars as we would have otherwise. We talk about twinning programs, but we think about twinning with some other nation. How can we have twinning, for example, between us and France, between us and Germany, between us and China, between us and India? But how about twinning next door? Is it possible, for example, for Emory University to link with Georgia Tech? Georgia Tech is world-class in engineering and science. We are world-class in humanities as well as in healthcare or medicine. One can pool those resources together. We have tremendous amount of surplus capacity in one campus and a shortage in another campus. We try to alleviate that by having some recognition of courses, but why not have a full twinning programs? And there's a live experiment going on at Emory University where Georgia Tech offers a 5-year bioengineering program. I think it's ranked number 1 or number 2 in the world, where Georgia Tech engineers spend a couple of years at Emory learning about biological sciences, the hospital aspect, the clinical side, while they are engineers. And apparently they are very well placed. So twinning with neighbors is one more suggestion. So there are so many possibilities. This is just a laundry list as we all make it in the academic world. It does not mean that every one of them is applicable to everybody. But my view is that the spectacular growth of the undergraduate business education that we have seen is not likely to sustain if it remains status quo. It needs to innovate and revitalize itself and continue the journey. It should not go the same way as what is happening to the MBA degrees. Fewer and fewer students are applying for the GMAT scores. Fewer and fewer students want to go and do their MBA. Most of them end up into consulting work, 75% into management consultancy or investment banking, which is not what the MBAs were designed for. Undergraduate has a huge potential if it is willing and able to bring about innovation and changes. I hope you enjoyed this lecture or presentation. Thank you very much.